I haven't done one of these for a long time. Not because I don't see them, but because the focus of my YouTube channel isn't really going after a bunch of crazy feminists. There's plenty out there that do, and I'm really not trying to compete with them, or anyone else for that matter. However, every once in a while you run across something that you really have to respond to, and this is one such video. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not against equality for all, regardless of gender, race, religion, sexual orientation, or anything else. I'm an egalitarian across the board. I think all people ought to be equal in all things, no exceptions. But the fact is, a lot of self-proclaimed feminists, they're not really for any of those things. Oh, sure, when it comes to women's rights, they're all over it. When it comes to poor rights and minority rights, they're right on the spot. But when it turns out that men, especially white men, most especially wealthy white men, have less rights than any of their pet groups, they're nowhere to be found. In fact, they openly fight against it. So, they're not really for equality for all, as they so often claim. They're often outright bigots, racists, and classists. But hey, what can you expect from the left? So let's see what this YouTuber has to say, essentially since she starts out proclaiming that anything non-feminist sucks.
So for whatever reason, you found yourself in an argument against feminism. But here's the thing, your argument sucks. Let's start with the most basic shutdown against feminism. Feminism is sexist. You've come to this conclusion because you've been taught that sexism is basically the prejudice, stereotyping, and discrimination on the basis of sex.
Well, it is. If we go to Merriam-Webster, the definition of sexism is as follows: behavior, conditions, or attitudes that foster stereotypes of social roles based on sex. Feminists, on the other hand, are only concerned with sexism as it relates to women, which is, by the very definition of the word, sexist. These people are hypocrites to the highest degree and really have no clue.
Right. Before I even get into this, I just want to state that it's impossible for the oppressor to be the oppressed.
No it isn't. First off, I want to point out that she's just making this assertion with no evidence and no support whatsoever. It just is, according to her. Secondly, she's assuming that all men, by definition, are oppressors. Every single one of them. She also asserts that all women are oppressed, again with no evidence. Every single one of them. This is an absurd claim to make, and it's also very easy to disprove. Now let's go back to slavery days. There were free blacks who had slaves. So if blacks were oppressed, and they certainly were because they had no voting rights, free or not, then black slave owners could not possibly have been oppressing black slaves, could they? By the same token, in Nazi concentration camps, there were Jewish guards who were in charge of keeping the other Jews in line. But Jews were oppressed. They were imprisoned. They couldn't possibly be oppressing anyone else, could they? This whole line of reasoning is complete bullshit.
That's the nature of oppression. Being offended by something is not the same as being oppressed by something.
You say that, but you don't believe it. Or at least, you don't believe it when it comes to yourself and your political leaning. Liberals constantly whine that they're being offended, therefore they deserve compensation, usually in the form of shutting somebody else up, or infringing on their right to free expression because your precious little feelings have been hurt. It's your side screaming for speech codes, safe spaces, and also the ones yelling down men trying to promote men's rights. Let's not be complete hypocrites here, shall we?
So bearing that in mind, quite simply, sexism is a form of oppression. I am not saying that men don't face negative stereotyping, and I am not saying that men don't face prejudice and oppression in society.
You're just saying you don't give a damn.
However, only oppressed people experience all of that, as well as it being institutionalized and systemic.
Wait a minute. Where is any of this institutionalized? Please point out one place, just one, where sexism against women is institutionalized. I can point out plenty where sexism against men is institutionalized. And funny, feminists aren't up in arms about any of it.
Here's how your argument wouldn't have sucked. If you're discussing sexism within feminism, it should be about how some parts of feminism could actually be really problematic for trans people, as well as people who don't assign to any gender and people who are gender fluid. A lot of mainstream feminism at the moment needs to work a lot harder on being more inclusive.
That may very well be the case, but it ignores that some parts of feminism are actually problematic for women, and men, and pretty much everyone. I agree that feminism needs to work harder on being inclusive, because they absolutely are not.
but men can get raped too. I can't stand this argument. You have to be a certain level of horrible to pit victims against each other, whatever gender.
But isn't that exactly what you're doing? I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume that she's from England, based on the accent and the room decor. In England, feminists protested against men's rape centers, demanding to have them closed because they might interfere with funding for women's rape centers. That's pitting one group of victims against another group of victims, isn't it? In fact, England has no provisions in its laws for male rape. Everything in British laws refers only to rape of women and not a thing for the rape of men. And when men's rights groups tried to get this changed so that rape of both genders was included, who came out in protest? Yep, feminists. So don't give me any of this victim against victim bullshit. It's your side that's doing it.
Also, I find that people use this argument a lot when discussing rape culture, and actually they don't quite know what the discussion is about. I want to handle this the right way because feminism supports all victims of rape.
Except for all those male victims of rape in England, of course.
But in the context of why your argument sucks, we are fully aware that men get raped too. We are not ignorant.
You might not be ignorant, you just don't care. This is blatantly obvious when you look at a lot of YouTube and Tumblr feminists who clearly not only don't care about men, they're actively seeking revenge against men for perceived wrongs. Now, I want to stop here for a second and address something that I'm sure some people might have already picked up on. I am generalizing. I'm not saying that all people who self-identify as feminists are hate-filled assholes, but certainly some are. And since our feminist here is likewise generalizing, saying that this is how feminists are instead of this is what she personally believes, then I can do the same. I'm not implying that she believes any of the things that I'm bringing up, but there certainly are a lot of very vocal feminists who openly do, and that's something that our little YouTube feminist here isn't pointing out. It's one thing to speak for yourself. It's another to pretend that your views are universal.
What we were actually discussing was rape culture, so not the act itself. Rape culture is when you ask victims what they were wearing. Were they flirting beforehand? Asking if they possibly had too much to drink. Whilst anyone can get raped, rape culture predominantly affects women.
Rape culture doesn't exist. It's common sense in any legal situation to get all the facts, whether those facts offend you or not. So it might be important, especially in a court of law, to know what the rape victim was wearing, what they were doing, and how it might have impacted the act. That isn't saying they were responsible for it or not responsible for it. That's just how criminal investigations and court cases work.
Men do not get asked if they were showing too much skin. Rape culture is currently ingrained in society. There are people that would never rape anybody, but sometimes their actions and sometimes their words might contribute towards rape culture. Here's how your argument wouldn't suck. Every single rape prevention tip is geared towards people being in charge of not getting raped, not teaching rapists not to rape. So there's the big problem. The other problem in that is that most of these tips are aimed at women, with colour changing nail varnish for example. There needs to be more done to prevent rape for everybody, such as those glasses that change colour when they detect a substance. That way everyone can be safe.
Here's something for you to consider, although I know you won't, but you're not going to talk people out of committing crimes. You're just not. It doesn't matter if you're talking about rape or burglary or murder. People who commit these crimes are going to commit these crimes no matter what you say to them. If you could just teach people not to murder, we wouldn't have prisons stuffed full of murderers. If you could just tell people not to steal, the courts wouldn't be jammed up with burglary cases. Thinking that you can magically tell people not to commit crimes and they'll say, okay, like they never thought about it before, is foolish and overly simplistic thinking. Therefore, we have to tell people how to lessen their chances of being victims of these crimes. We tell people how to avoid being robbed. Walk in lit areas, don't flash around a lot of cash or expensive belongings, etc. We tell kids how to avoid being molested. Don't talk to strangers. Don't go somewhere with someone if you feel uncomfortable, etc. And we tell people how to avoid being raped. It isn't perfect by any means, but it will lessen your particular chances of being raped by not putting yourself into a dangerous situation where rape is more likely. It's called personal responsibility. Ever heard of it? Nah, I didn't think so, especially since she immediately turns to glasses that change color rather than telling women to keep an eye on their own drinks. Or better yet, don't go to places where predators congregate.
Well, that's just my opinion. Before any argument, you're going to have to show that you know what you're talking about before your opinion is valid. I can tell you that I think socks have emotions. That's just my opinion. It doesn't make it true. Most of the time this has been used because you said your piece, somebody else has come back with personal experience or references, or anything really, and because your argument doesn't extend past that's that, then you swiftly state that that is your made-up opinion. Instead of saying that's just your opinion, try saying, I thought of this, but I'm not going to do any research on this, because I feel like I am right. Please do your research, because without it, no one has a leg to stand on.
I'm sorry you can't spell opinion. And you haven't shown that you have the slightest clue what you're talking about. You're just spouting common feminist rhetoric that you've never personally considered. If you had, you would have figured out some of the issues that I've already pointed out. But sadly, she doesn't know what opinions really are. An opinion, well, it shouldn't be any crazy thought that just wanders into your head. It ought to be something that, at least hopefully, you've considered carefully. Yeah, I know a lot of people have bizarre opinions, but those are not opinions worth respecting. When someone comes and tells me it's their opinion that there are ghosts roaming the streets, that makes me slowly back away because that person is clearly out of their mind. When a feminist comes and tells me that we live in a culture dedicated to raping women, the same thing happens. Both of these opinions are equally outlandish and totally unsupported by any evidence whatsoever. Just because people are stupid, that doesn't mean we should respect their stupidity, and that goes for feminists too.
I am so sick hearing about feminism. Shocker, so are we!
No, you're not. If you were sick of hearing about feminism, you wouldn't spend every second of your day talking about it. For a lot of feminists, they cannot talk about anything else. It's like the crazy religious people who bring up Jesus 147 times in a 3-minute conversation. They don't have to do it. They choose to do it. They are fanatics, just as a lot of feminists are. Fanaticism is not something to be proud of.
Please help us not have to talk about this all the time. Well, I'm a woman and I don't find that offensive. This is quite a hefty topic about internalized misogyny, and that is a whole other video.
And there we go. I was waiting for this one. The idea that if you don't agree with the speaker, that you've got something wrong with you. This is really commonplace, not just with feminism, but with a lot of heavily emotional topics. The idea that if you hold a view outside of their quote-unquote norm, that you're to be pitied, not respected. For atheists who abandon religion, theists won't respect that decision, or even look into it. They always assume that someone in the church harmed them. It's never religion to blame. It's some experience that hurt your feelings. Well, no. Lots of people are sick of feminism because feminists have made it an annoying subject. They look at the claims of feminists and realize that those claims are not only not supported by objective facts, they're just overly emotional reactions to things that are extremely insignificant.
Your argument sucks because you do not speak on behalf of all women. Neither do I. Neither does anybody.
But you seem to think that you do. Imagine that. Deny it all you want, but you've done nothing but make claims about all women through this video. You haven't said once that this is what I think. You've said this is what feminists think. This is what feminism is. Never just your own opinions. You're now asserting that your own opinions extend to others, and anyone who doesn't agree with your opinions, well, they got something wrong with them. This is especially true when she says that things have a negative ramification on you, even when she hasn't demonstrated that's actually true. She's pretending that she knows better than you do. If that's not pretending to speak for all women, I don't know what is.
Except maybe Beyonce. When you say this, you're choosing to ignore the negative ramifications that this particular thing might have on other women. You may even be overlooking the negative ramifications this could have on you. Either way, it's a really selfish argument. I can't tell you how to feel about things, that's up to you, but don't throw everyone else under the bus in the process.
You can't tell others how to feel about things, but you can tell them that if they don't feel the same way that you do, there's something wrong with them. Gotcha.
Yeah, but what about men's rights? Men already have all the rights.
No, they don't. I thought you started out saying you wanted equal rights for all, but apparently not. There are lots of rights that women have that men do not. Yet feminists aren't fighting for equality there, are they? Of course not. But please, tell us specifically what rights you don't have. Go ahead. We'll wait.
I think people use this argument a lot because it's hard to see just how something affects your life until you don't have it. I'm middle class and white. I come from extreme privilege, and if it wasn't for people talking about it, I never would have thought about it. Because when you're privileged, you don't have to think about it. Also, men's rights movements that are around now don't even care about men. That's what really pisses me off. Being fair, any movement that sets out to help people is a good thing, right?
Well, if it's a good thing, Why do feminists try to disrupt said movements and scream that men's rights advocates are scum? Now, I can't think of a single instance, and I could be wrong here, so please present evidence if I've missed something. But where have men's rights groups in recent history pulled any fire alarms to stop a feminist meeting from taking place? Or where have men's rights groups called the police to break up feminist groups? Or where have men's rights groups tried to get feminist leaders fired from their jobs? Or maybe, just maybe, attacked a woman because she wore a shirt they didn't like in a TV interview? Please point out where any of these things have recently happened, because I can certainly point to where feminists have done all of that.
The problem is the men's rights movements do not support male victims of rape, they do not support male domestic abuse victims, and they don't support trans men. Do you know who do support them? Feminists! Feminism is ruining movies. /series /comics. This argument gets rolled out every time something gets launched with women in it, basically. Why is it totally fine to expect women to enjoy and relate to things that involve mainly men, but as soon as more than one woman comes on screen, we're taking over?
At issue here, and it's not just feminism, but all leftist social causes, they pretty much entirely misunderstand the point and purpose of movies. The point of movies is to entertain and, whether they like it or not, to make money. This means that you put the best writers, the best directors, and the best actors into your movies so that more people will go and see them and the movie makers will make more money. Movies do not exist to push diversity. They exist to push quality. But the left wants diversity, and they really couldn't care less about success. They want more female actors, more black actors, more gay actors, whether those people are the best in their field or not. They don't care about making good movies. They care about making people feel good. And the idea that there are not movies made specifically for women is laughable. But take a look at the highest grossing films in every single year and tell me which movies do better. Is it the action-adventure films, or is it the rom-coms? Figure it out.
Here's how your argument wouldn't suck. Just injecting female characters into a film or a TV series and not spending the time developing their characters or even writing them not only ruins the movie and the TV show, but also puts a massive hindrance in women in the industry, and it's crap.
There are a lot of excellent female actors out there who can carry a movie on their own and who do so regularly. But again, this goes back to success and money. And if the movie-going audience is willing to spend more money on a big-budget special effects film starring men than they are on a movie starring women, whose fault is that? It isn't Hollywood.
That means I can hit girls, right? Don't hit anybody. Why do you want to hit people? Is it like really hard to live, restraining yourself from hitting people all day?
No, you shouldn't hit anyone. But I find it funny that women seem to want equality only in the good things and never the bad. Women fight to get all the positives, but they never want anything to do with the negatives. Recently, it was suggested that we need to require all women to sign up for the draft, and it was the feminists who came out in droves screaming they don't want that. Good with the bad, you take it all, or go the fuck away.
You're using this argument as a quick way to put feminists in their place, to make them think that this isn't actually what they want. The other thing is that you're already hitting us.
What do you mean stop hitting you? You're ignoring all the women who are hitting men, aren't you?
In the UK alone, 1.4 million women and 700,000 men are suffering from domestic abuse. So we want you to stop hitting us. Not all men. If we're discussing something about men and it's not something that you have particularly done, then that's great. The reason why your argument sucks is because you have to understand that many men have done this. A majority even.
It's a fair point though, one that feminists don't address at all. All men do not abuse women. In fact, only a minuscule percentage of men do, just as a minuscule percentage of women abuse men. But I don't see feminists making that distinction, do you? Of course not. They generalize about all men. I will say that she has a point, one that I've made plenty of times myself. If someone is talking about something that one group has done, and they're clearly not talking about you, don't take it personally. But of course, feminists freak out when someone claims that feminists act in a particular fashion too, saying they're not like that. Okay, take your own advice. If you're not like that, don't internalize it. Just move on with your life.
It's always sucky to have to acknowledge that something that you're a part of has bad bits, but that's just life.
Hey, that's a great idea. Why haven't you done any of that? I've brought up plenty of points that apparently you have no clue about, and that doesn't stop you from spouting a bunch of nonsense, does it?
So stop driving conversations back to you because it's not about you. This argument gets used a lot when women do things to protect themselves and are a bit defensive. As we mentioned earlier, rape is up to us to stop. And that's when they say, but not all men. Like, you may not be a rapist, but you've got to acknowledge why women do certain things to protect themselves. You can't take these actions personally because there is a much bigger picture than you. The thing with all these arguments against feminism is that if you wanted to have a proper discussion about it, you would have Googled it and done your research, but you didn't, which makes you an arse. I didn't mean to attack anyone in this video, I just wanted to show you just how ridiculous these arguments sound. And I know there's tons that I missed, which means they'll probably end up in the comments, which means, much to your excitement, I will do another one of these. But generally, you should just research things that you're talking about, and if you don't know anything about a subject, don't weigh in with your opinion, and maybe just trust what people say about their own experiences. Just kind of simple stuff.
But your arguments sound just as ridiculous, don't they? You ought to research things before you spout off about them, but feminists rarely do. That's why absurd things like the gender wage gap keep coming up. It's been totally discredited, yet it leads most feminist arguments. It's the people who have researched things, the people who have looked into claims and found them to be foolish. Those are generally the people who are disagreeing with feminism and the people feminists insist on attacking because it doesn't make them feel good to be told that their ideas are crap. And no, if you don't know anything about a subject, don't trust what people say. Go do your own research and learn the facts. Just because people say something doesn't mean they have a clue what they're talking about, and this video proves that pretty conclusively. I have no problem at all with people who actually care about equality for all, and I'm sure that there are some feminists out there who actually do that. But the overwhelming majority that I run into, especially on YouTube and Tumblr, those are not people who want everyone to be equal. Those are people who want to bring men, especially white men, down. They're seeking revenge, not equality. They want to get back at people for perceived slights. They want all the good and none of the bad. Where they have less rights, they want more. And where they have more rights, well, they want to keep having more. This is not what equality is. They don't want to have to earn anything. They want to be presented with the good stuff on a silver platter. Whenever something doesn't go their way, instead of trying to find out what went wrong, they look for someone to blame. There is no appreciable gender wage gap. Women tend to choose to go into lesser paying fields. Within those fields, men and women make exactly the same amount of money. Men tend to work more hours than women. Men tend to be more flexible and open to transfer than women. Men tend to sacrifice more home time to be at work than women. These are the reasons that men get more money and faster promotions because they've gone above and beyond the call of duty to earn them. But earning things is something that leftists hate. They want to be given things because it makes them feel good, not because they've earned them. Well, sorry. That's how the world works. It's not unfair because of your genitalia. It's unfair because you're not putting in the same amount of effort. Welcome to reality, feminists. Let us know when you figure this shit out.